The 53 man is set. Welcome to the Hawkszone. Some tough decisions were made today by Mike McDonald and his staff. And then there was obviously some choices that we knew were going to happen, but each position group, there was a lot of decisions to be made. Decisions were made. We're set. 53 man. We're going to get into it on the other side.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game.
And it's run. What a run. Marshawn Lynch. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got a lead. Leon Wilson to catch. Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does. Is it going to be
You've
another
got to
9
look for
and 8?
players who've got to finish some things.
They have to fix the offense.
Part of his success and part of
ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear? That's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the Hawkszone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Preseason's over. The 53 man roster is set. That means we're ready to go. Guys, before we get into all that stuff, if you've been watching the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, go down, hit the subscribe button below, and so you're part of the family now. And hit the like button, notification button, so you know when upcoming episodes are coming up. Because like we've been saying the last couple of weeks here, we're tuning up and it's all in now. We're bringing you guys episodes like this one, this 53 man, and we're bringing this to you right away so we can keep everybody up to date. What's going on, Bryce? The list came out, decisions were all made. We've been talking about the 53 man for the last few weeks. We've done our own projections. We just had a round table and we really broke it down with Dan Vians and the guys. We've been breaking down a lot of guys. You've been talking about a lot of guys that were on the bubble. You talked about a lot of guys that made this team. What's your overall thoughts, man?
Well, a couple things with it, man. Like, I look at it and I go, this is the initial roster. Everyone else in the league's made cuts, so there's clearly maybe guys that John Schneider and Mike McDonald and that whole coaching staff and personnel department have decided, hey, you know what? Like, we like this guy. We're going to go grab this guy because he's a better fit for what we're doing than, say, someone that they initially had on this roster. My biggest surprise, honestly, dude, came from, I think, more on the offensive side of the ball. They kept 12 offensive linemen, right? Like, that's a big number. And one of the things that I said, to you, to multitudes of our guests that we've had on, is I was really high on Michael Jarrell. I was really high on Sateo Lamea. And I was high on Jalen Sundell, who was, the third string center. But when they signed him, he was a 3-year starter, all conference player, and then moved to tackle his last year at South Dakota. Or I think it might have been North Dakota. One of the Dakota schools there in the Div 2 or FCS level. But the thing for me is they went young. Like McClendon Curtis, who everybody had been talking about all minicamp, all everything. He was going to be, in that right guard battle. Anthony Bradford won that job.
Yeah.
Christian Haynes, I think, is going to push for starting potential between him and Laken Tomlinson for that left guard spot. At some point in the season, I could see Tomlinson losing that job potentially to Christian Haynes. The thing for me, I think that is going to be the next domino to fall on this O-line is what happens with Olu Olatimi, because the fact they kept an undrafted center in Jalen Sundell, who I had been saying for a while, he fits what Scott Huff wants to do. He likes to have mobile centers. Nick Harris, who was in here at the beginning of training camp, was a guy he had at UW, undersized, but he could move to the next level in college and get to that linebacker with ease. That's something I don't think Olu does very well. Olu got blown up in the Chargers game on that 4th down. Olu, I don't know if he fits this new regime style of how they want to do offense. I think they're kind of just stuck because they're not 100% sure if Connor Williams is ready to go week 1. I think there's a chance we see Olu as the week 1 starter until he gets, I wouldn't say game shape, until he can start really testing that knee with the weight bearing of having someone lean on him for Connor Williams. But there could be a situation where when Connor Williams is fully healthy, they may cut Olu and keep Jalen Sundell as their backup center. Like, he really impressed me. He got better every single game, every single rep he had. And honestly, in that last preseason game I was at, I thought he was the better center between him and Olu. Like, I thought he did a much better job handling the calls, dealing with the line and everything. And he's playing with 3s and 4s and stuff. Olu had Bradford and Cross and Fant and, Lincoln Tomlinson around him. And I thought, you know what, Jalen Sundell, you plug him in there, I think there might be a little bit of an uptick in the performance there in that group. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting breakdown.
Yeah, man, you're right. The Olu thing is interesting, and I agree with you, man. Like, it's kind of a wait and see with Connor. Obviously, they're like, oh, we're hopes is week 1, but like you and I have talked about on the show, there's a lot that he has to get right before he makes sure he's ready to go. Coming off an ACL, he's recovered quick, but now the next is the test. You don't want to push that guy too far, or too quickly. Like we mentioned, we talked about Abe Lucas. That here's a guy that is potentially, your long-term tackle. That's your hopes. So let's definitely not push this guy. So, Olu could be a guy there for Connor just for a little bit. And if he's not fitting the scheme, man, that's the thing. And there's no ties with Mike McDonald with Olu. So, it definitely could be one of those things. Another group I want to touch on where there's been some debate on was the receiver position. Obviously, the first few guys were shoo-ins, and we're not even going to talk about them. Well, you get down to the competition there, and guys we talked about, Aesop Winston was getting a lot of praise early. He was looking good in camp and some preseason games, a nice TD with Howell in that second preseason. But then Derek Young was a guy that's been around. He's been in the system for a few years, had some injuries, but just a physical specimen of a receiver. He can fly down the field for the size of him. He's just got a lot of intangibles. Derek was a guy that we thought was going to make this team, and especially after Mike McDonald praised, high praises for him. Aesop, for me, I sort of was like, well, you know what, just being that smaller receiver, and they sort of have, a couple of already sort of smaller guys that with obviously a lot more talent that will be starting with, Tyler and JSN's on the, not a small guy, but he's, definitely not a big receiver. So, you kind of look at it and you sort of, well, what other tools are they looking for? And a guy like Derek, do you pass up on him to keep Aesop? So that's why I thought he was going to make it. Chenault, you and I, we all agreed that he was going to be your number 5 guy. So it really came down to that last spot. What's your overall take of this receiver room now, and the fact that they went with Derek? And you think that was sort of maybe the thinking, the mindset with Mike, with maybe leaving Aesop off this squad?
I think honestly, I'm very happy with that receiving core.
Oh, yeah.
We had talked about it at length. I thought it was either going to be a toss-up between Aesop and Derek Young. Cody White, I thought maybe he had done enough to potentially get in that conversation. Right. But like you said, the intangibles and the athlete that Derek Young is not something you find all the time. You can find yourself in potentially an Aesop Winston Jr. or a Cody White. You don't find too many guys that give you those kind of intangibles. So I think the way they look at Derek Young is he kind of can do a little bit of the Laviska Shenault stuff. Like, he's a big dude that can run after the catch. He can give you a bit of that over-the-top threat of DK like a burner, but he also contributes a lot in special teams as a gunner.
Right.
And I think that's what endeared him so much to Mike McDonald was, this is a guy that's not your, I'm a receiver diva, like, I'm not going to go and do this. He literally will do whatever they ask him to do. And I think that's a real big selling point from Mike McDonald. If you look at a lot of these guys you take out our top 3, our bottom 3 receivers are guys that'll go do the dirty stuff. Jake Bobo, we've seen. He'll go stick his nose in there and block. Laviska Shenault will do the same thing. Derek Young will do the same thing. So there's definitely been a little bit of a change in a worker's mentality here with Seattle. You can see it in the O-line. Brady Russell made it as a tight end. He's another guy that endeared himself to Mike McDonald and his coaching staff by the way he performed in training camp, and he'd do anything. He'll long snap. He'll block on punts and kickoff, and then he'll go in and play tight end as well. So there was a lot of things there that I think you could kind of see throughout the process that guys started to separate themselves because of their ability to just go do things. The thing that surprised me, though, was only 3 running backs.
Right. I want to talk about the running backs. That was the next thing I want to bring up. George Halani left off, cut. You and I love Kenny Mack. Like, absolutely love him. I thought he was going to be the third guy, no question, especially even after the first preseason game. You saw the way he was running. But like you and I thought, they might have kept all 4. So that was interesting. So, but you look at it, and like you said, you add somewhere, you got to subtract somewhere. But with Kenny Mack, because I don't look at Kenny Mack as like, essentially just this third down guy. Like, oh, Kenny Mack, he's a third down guy. And I know you and I discussed how he need work on the pass pro and stuff like that, but he's just such a dynamic runner, and special teams, you want to talk about that as well. And unfortunately, that's a position where guys get banged up. I mean, being a Seahawk fan, anybody who's watched this team the last 10 years, count the amount of times where either we've had running backs hurt, out for extensive amount of time, the Penny Chris Carson era, calling, as much as we all thought it was awesome, calling beast mode off the couch and Turbin off the couch. It was like, so now, say, and Walker's had time on the shelf. Here's a guy that can fit right in and run and be dynamic, right? So what do you think the thinking was there, leaving Halani just off this roster altogether?
I think you can tell by the O-line. They valued their O-line and Derek Young more than they valued George Halani, because you kept 12 O-linemen. That's a lot of O-linemen, right? Like, you kept your young guys. You kept your 2 draft picks, and you kept an undrafted free agent there. And then you kept, obviously, Derek Young. So you added another guys that you were worried about. You also added Brady Russell to it. So somewhere it had to give. And I think it gave there because I think they look at Kenny Mack, and they don't look at him, I think, as a Travis Homer type third down back, where he's truly just a third down back and that's all he can do.
Right.
I think they look at Kenny Mack and go, hey, like, if we lose Ken Walker for a few, like, we're not
exactly
in trouble as much as we have been in the past, where it's like that steep drop off to DJ Dallas and Travis Homer and those type of guys. You're more in a situation of, it's like, okay, so next guy comes in, and I'm not saying Kenny Mack's going to go out there and run for 150 yards if he ever got, that situation given to him. But I think Kenny Mack can go in and he can give you a spell of a drive or two where you're not losing as much. And he also gives you a little bit more. He gives you a little bit of a slash type of runner that can catch out of the backfield. Like I've said for a while, I think out of the 3, he is probably the best receiving back we have.
Yeah.
And catching the ball out of the backfield. So that's where I kind of look at with their thought process here, is now you truly have 3 diverse running backs that are all excel at something, but they all also complement what the other one's weaknesses are. Charbonnet's your bruiser. Kenny Walker's kind of your all-around guy, and McIntosh is truly like your slasher. So if you lose one of them, you're not up Schitt's Creek like we've been in the past. And like you said, calling Marshawn Lynch or Robert Turbin off the bench to go, hey, we need you to come in and take 5 carries and not have anything out of those carries.
Yeah. Well, and I think we both were like talking about Halani, and we're like, he's kind of a poor man Charbonnet. And so, if you're Seattle, you look at that and say, Kenny Mack, Halani, unless you were going to carry 4, he had to be if you're carrying 3, it was like what Kenny did in preseason. You cannot cut that guy, and he will not make a practice squad. He's definitely getting picked up. So it's Mike McDonald would have to be crazy to let that guy go. Every game he played good. It wasn't like he had one good game or one good run, and the other 2 games he got stuffed or something like that. And maybe he was just playing against a group of guys that can't stop the run. I mean, he has some intangibles where he sees the field and he hits it. And like you said, he's dynamic. He's the best out of the 3 catching the football. So you just gotta. It's exciting, the running back room, and like you said, they all bring Zach's that bruiser. And you and I talked about, like, we didn't think those guys were used properly last year. Zach, it was like, so now you're coming in with Zach as this true bruiser of a running back, Ken doing his thing. So you really get, you like the running back room a lot. And like you said, like I mentioned, you add somewhere, you subtract. That's where they had to do it. And, like I said, I wasn't crazy about him just because we have Zach. If we
Yeah.
didn't have that back, then yes, there's a definite place for him. But I think he's just expendable at that point. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
excited about that, man. You hit on the tight end. You mentioned four. We're probably going to carry four. You didn't even question it, and they carried four. Brady Russell, you showed up. Just seems like a player that Mike loves, right? Like you said, nose down, do whatever it takes. AJ Barner, young guy that definitely can grow with this team. Uh, and then obviously Noah Fant and Brown that we signed at blocking tight end. They can do a couple things and get back on the field healthy. But so it just, it sort of is aligned with what we've been talking about. Guys that, bring certain things to the table. The big surprise, like you said, on the offense was the amount of guys, and then like we were talking about Stone Fourth site, like he was sort of on the fence first, but because he's just that veteran who's been there, and when you got question marks of who's healthy, can you come in for a few games and just hold it down? I think he has a place there. But yeah, man. And then I guess if you head over to the defensive side of the ball, let me start with linebackers, man. Like you were high on a few guys, and there was guys we were talking about. You were down at the game. You noticed right away about Drake Thomas, a guy that
Mhm.
really was like, a lot of people probably, I don't think, thought he was going to make the squad. You got John Radigan. You had a lot of guys that, were on the bubble of like, well, John's been here and all this kind of stuff. You liked him when we picked him up. And then, what did you notice about him? And then you all of a sudden got some confidence that he was going to make this squad.
Honestly, with Drake Thomas, man, the thing for me is when we got him last year, I was like, holy shit, we've got like a actual like solid linebacker. Like, I can't believe the Raiders were dumb enough to put that guy up on their practice squad, or try to push him through to it. Because he was a great player in college. And so when we got him, he's smart, he's athletic, and he's really good in coverage. And watching Mike McDonald's defense, how I've been watching it through the preseason, watching what it's asking of like the Tyrese Knights and the Dotsons and the Jerome Bakers, is there's one thing Dotson and Jerome Baker were known for when we signed them: their coverage skills. They were both highly graded coverage linebackers.
Right.
And so when I was looking at who we had, O'Connell is not a great coverage linebacker. He's better than John Radigan, but John Radigan isn't a good coverage linebacker. Michael Barrett, who didn't make this roster, who we traded for, he wasn't a great coverage linebacker. Well, if I'm looking at it, Tyrese Knight was pretty well regarded coming out of college as a good coverage linebacker and could run and fly and hit. And so when I watched Drake Thomas in that third preseason game, he had the green dot on. You don't just give anybody the green dot on your defense, regardless if it's first, second, or third team. That's someone that you truly trust to call the defense and get everyone in the right spots. He came in very, very quickly for Radigan. Like, I'd say Radigan had a series with Knight, and then it was Drake Thomas was in. And it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Like, first off, I couldn't remember who 42 was. So I was like scouring through my phone on the roster going, who in the world's 42? And then I realized it was Drake Thomas and went, well, that's interesting. He's got the green dot on. And you watched through that game, he was in the right spots. He was in good coverage fits. He was kind of all over the field. And so when I look at that linebacker, you've got Dotson, Baker, Knight, and Thomas. There's one thing they all have in common besides their coverage abilities. They're all extremely good athletes. They can move. They can cover the field sideline to sideline. John Radigan, Patrick O'Connell, and Michael Barrett, I don't know if they could do that. And in my opinion, with Drake Thomas and Tyrese Knight, you're also going to get good special teams play out of both of them. They also list Draymond Jones as a linebacker, as an edge linebacker,
Right,
I should
right.
say. So that's also interesting. And now they've obviously got Therese Gibson. So I'm really looking forward to Drake Thomas actually being out there. I think he's going to make an impact. And it should be interesting. I think maybe they thought they could get Michael Barrett through to the practice squad. Maybe that's what their thought process is. Or there's maybe a linebacker that's getting cut that they're excited about and going to try and go get. You look at the defensive line. Pretty much everyone we anticipated being there is there. Cameron Young was on the pup, so we kind of figured that was going to happen. So they kept Miles Adams. So Miles Adams is the guy that they're keeping kind of as, I guess, your other, nose tackle sub with Jaron Reed in there. The interesting thing, though, and I think this needs to be talked about a little bit, was they didn't put Chenna on IR.
Right.
They kept him on their 53, which tells me that maybe he's not out 4 to 6. Maybe he's out 3.
Couple. Yeah.
Like, you got to remember, there's this whole week
still
he's going to rehab.
Weeks. Yeah, exactly.
And then there's all of next week, and then they play the Broncos. And then if he's healthy by New England, that's 3 full weeks. Like, we got to remember, this is week 0. There's no games this weekend. So he has a full opportunity to start rehabbing like crazy, which I bet you he's already doing. So there's maybe a good chance that we see him week 2 or week 3 versus the Dolphins, instead of how we thought, oh, crap, we might not see him till Detroit or the Giants game. So I found that interesting. Safety room, exactly how we figured it was going to shake out.
Yeah.
Bryant, Jenkins, Love, Wallace, and Jenkins being listed on the 53, and they released Ty Cotta and Blair. Jenkins clearly is going to be healthy week 1. The cornerbacks was interesting. DJ James got cut. Was one of the first ones we got notified they got cut today. So he did have an up and down preseason. Like, he made some plays, but he got burnt in a lot of coverage situations. Nehemiah Pritchett was pretty good and consistent through most of the preseason. Obviously, the top 3 we figured Brown, Witherspoon, Woolard. But then the one that, again, another guy I was really high on because of his versatility and kick return ability was D. Williams.
Yeah,
I think
he
that's
made it. Yeah,
kind of the thing
I wasn't sure about it. Like, I like him, but I was a guy. Do they leave off this? Because, like you said, where does he fit? But because of being dynamic and being involved in the special teams and in return game, then you see more of a spot for him, opposed to a guy that actually we haven't touched on, D. Eskridge.
Yep.
There was a lot of people there was a big play that he had, and all the guys, were hyped, and people think, okay, what, guys are behind this guy and all this kind of stuff. But you don't make decisions off of that. And at the end of the day, he's been in the system for a long time. Health is part of it, and the other part of it, he just didn't do anything really. He just had the speed. But where are you? Who are you letting go ahead of Eskridge? You know what I mean? Like, as a receiver, a healthy Derek Young now, like, we've had enough looks at Eskridge, right? And where is he's not going to start? We're deep at receiver now with the drafting of JSN. Like pre-JSN, sure, D, you're thinking, okay, is D going to get on the field? Is he going to stay healthy? Him next with Tyler and DK. But once you bring in a guy like JSN, and now you're locked with your starting receivers, and where there's no place as far as a receiver. And then if you can have a healthy Derek and Chenault, I mean, really, T. Williams is more dynamic, more versatile now. So I still wasn't sure if maybe I thought maybe he still would make this team make the 53, but he doesn't. And what's your thoughts overall? I mean, were you surprised, or were you pretty sure that he wasn't going to make this squad?
With D. Eskridge, I was almost certain he wasn't going to make the squad, even though he had his punt return and stuff. And a lot of people, he could do this. He's dynamic. He's this. Look at his punt return. He did some jet sweeps. Thing that still was like buried in the back of my head was John Schneider saying, well, if Pete and his crew were back, D. Eskridge wouldn't have made this team. They would have cut him this offseason. So that to me is a very big indictment on the fact that, okay, really, this is like if D. Eskridge had come out and been like a dominant receiver in the preseason, like lit it up, and then had the special teams, I think D. Eskridge makes this team.
Yeah.
D. Eskridge basically had one jet sweep that we can call on where we're like, oh, yeah, that was a pretty good play. George Holani made the block for that against the Chargers. And then his punt return. Name me, outside of those 2 plays,
No.
Name me any other time D. Eskridge did anything of notice. He didn't. And then he was hurt. He was hurt in the Tennessee game. Like, he didn't play again. So that to me
health
would
again
be
is an issue,
literally indictment. It didn't matter what he did on Saturday this past weekend on the game against the Browns. He was not going to be a guy on this team. And people are saying, oh, well, someone's going to go pick him up. Like, I saw some people even in our show comments saying, hey,
That's right.
I think I'm worried he's going to go to the 49ers or the Chiefs. He hasn't put enough receiving tape out, I think, for those teams to take a shot on him. They may look at him as a kick returner. Okay, great. Like, if you're going to take D. Eskridge as a kick returner, have at it. Go for it. But he hasn't even shown consistency at that outside of this one punt return. Like,
yeah, D's not he's not a guy I'm worried about if another team picks him up.
No, and that's the kind of thing for me that, like, I'm not worried about it either. You want D. Eskridge, go for it. I would have been more worried if, like, a team had picked up Derek Young, because Derek Young's shown us what he can do as a wide receiver in a lot of aspects.
Okay. Or if I cut you in here, like, here's what I would be scared of. The people that have been screaming to trade like DK Metcalf.
Mm-hmm.
That's a guy that I'm like, do not do that, because that'll come back to haunt you if he gets picked up on another team. You imagine him in a Niners uniform? So that that's the kind of stuff that you got to be worried about. If team, listen, if a guy picks up D and he has a little bit of success, that's one of those things where you're happy for the guy.
Oh yeah,
right? Because he's not.
I want to see D. Eskridge go off and do something.
It's not working here in Seattle, and it never was going to, right? And as we've gotten deeper at that position, again, talking about guys that are expendable, he's an expendable dude. But like I said, and maybe I think it's slowing down a little bit. But the people that were calling for DK to get shipped out, that's when you start being like, hey, let me tell you something. If that guy gets shipped out, he's making another team better. He's making you worse when he comes into town to kick your ass. So those are the guys that you worry if you trade them or but when we're talking about this type of bubble stuff, like, it's more about building your 53 that's fitting you as an entire unit. And you look at Derek Young and you say, this is a better fit for what we're doing.
No, 100%. Totally agree with you, man.
So, yeah, man, I mean, really, it's funny because it's been awesome really breaking down the 53 this last month and really dissecting these guys, because it's the one guy that there was only a couple really not even surprised. Halani was a surprise to us, I think. Yeah. Just because we thought 4 backs, and he had a good camp, right? That was the thing. We've had guys on here we've had guys on the show that cover the team that at one point thought he was ahead of Kenny Mack. Mm-hmm. I always thought Kenny was the guy. But to their credit, guys that are on at practice every day watching these guys saying this guy's having an amazing camp. So that to us, when we hear that and we talk to these guys, you're thinking, okay, well, he's got a spot on this 53. Mm-hmm. Whether he's the 3rd guy or the 4th guy, or they fit him in wherever they fit in, he's got to have a spot on this team. So that was a surprise. D. Williams, not like a shock that he made it, but like we weren't sure where does he fit, but he's dynamic, so he makes it. Other than that, man, like, you look at this, what we talked about, the guys that made it, it all sort of makes sense. The 2 young linemen that we've talked about, they're projects, but you got to get them on the roster. So overall, I look at this 53, I'm excited what we got. Like, it just seems like we're pretty solid top to bottom. Like, of course, people are going to question the O-line and the health of the O-line, but at the end of the day, man, like, people got to realize, if you look around the league and you look at any O-line and take a roster, name me 5 starting studs across the line that there's no weak links, there's no concerns. And that's where a guy like Ryan Grubb comes into play and says, okay, I understand my weaknesses here. I understand we're maybe not as healthy here on this side. Okay, I know how to adjust to that. And that's what I'm excited about.
The only O-line, dude, that I could really say, like you were just saying, that's a true stud, 5 across, where you go, yeah, they're a phenomenal, is Detroit's.
Sure.
Detroit's O-line, but they've drafted and they've built that O-line.
Yes.
we're asking Scott Huff to start doing that now. We don't know. Mike Jarrell might turn out to be our long-term answer at right tackle if Abe Lucas can't go. We don't know. LeMaya could end up being the long-term left tackle. Christian Haynes may beat out Bradford, and Bradford becomes a backup going forward, and Christian Haynes is your right tackle. And maybe Sundell or Connor Williams becomes our long-term option at center. Like, I feel more optimistic about the guys they've kept this year on that offensive line than I have in the last 5. Because when I saw those guys in the preseason play, I could see progress. I could see them getting better. There's been guys in the past where I'm like, you're not getting any better, man. And you've been in this league for 3 years. Like, Stone Forsythe is the one I'm still kind of surprised that made it. I thought there was a chance he didn't, and I think that it was between him and McClendon Curtis. And that's why I think personally, in the last game that I was at there, they flopped him. They put Stone Forsythe on the right and McClendon Curtis on the left because I think they were thinking in their heads, hey, let's see what Stone gives us on the right side as the potential swing tackle until Abe Lucas is healthy and George Fant can take that role back. If not, Stone Forsythe's there or McClendon Curtis. So let's put them both on opposite and see how they handle it because that's what they're going to be doing. They're going to be our swing tackles. Stone Forsythe played better at right tackle in the preseason game and beat out McClendon Curtis.
Yeah, absolutely. But man, overall, I think you and I are happy with it. I mean, like, you know, we've talked about it. I love how it's set. I'm just ready to for week 1 play some football. Let's get into it. Preseason was great. Camp's great. Everything just seems like it's just going, you know, I'm not going to say to plan, but just new coach. I mean, we can't talk enough about how we think Mike is just growing into this role quickly, and you get excited about it, you know, especially in our division with the team we're putting together. I'm excited for week 1, and I'm not just saying it. I'm intrigued too to see how this team rolls out of the gate. Because again, I'm not going to be like, okay, just I'm going to listen, I don't expect them to be firing all cylinders. If they do, then, you know, like the first preseason game looked good, but there's going to be some mistakes. But I think this team's going to grow together, and I'm really excited and optimistic for this squad. And I think a lot of people are now, man. The way the last few months have gone, the growth of this team, I think a lot of people we've talked to are becoming very optimistic with this team here.
I think the biggest thing is you now seen a sample size of what Mike Macdonald's going to do. You've seen how he commands the sideline. You've seen the structure. You've seen that he's got an idea of how he wants to do things. Like, he's not coming in as some rookie coach that you can see is trying to learn on the fly. Like, he is, but he's so calm and collected while doing it. And I think Leslie Frazier is a big reason of that. And I'm going to give John Schneider some credit here. I think John Schneider is a big part of that because he is such a seasoned veteran GM. And I think sometimes people might have forgot about how important John Schneider was in that initial Pete Carroll era. I think if you give Pete another GM, I don't know if we have the success that we do. I think John Schneider has been so integral to the success of the Seattle Seahawks franchise for the last 15 years. And now he's got a guy, I think he jives. I'm going to say this now, and people can hold their receipts. I think he's found a new coach he jives better with than Pete Carroll. Not saying him and Pete didn't jive well, and they obviously brought us a Super Bowl and back-to-back and a very historic run. I think his persona lines up better with Mike Macdonald than maybe it did with Pete in some areas. And I think we're going to start seeing that come through in the next coming years.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with all that. So guys, there you have it, man. 53 man is set, getting ready to go. Week 1 is just around the corner, so get ready for it. We're still coming to you guys. We're gonna have a pre-game preview show that's gonna be coming up in that week, early in that week. So look out for that, and a couple other things coming up. And we're working on a few things. We're gonna have some other guests that are coming up here in September, and as the season goes on, it's I mean, we're all in bringing you guys content here, so we're excited to go. So you know what, that's it tonight. 53 man set. Bryce, ready to go here, man.
Yeah, I'm ready to go, man. Can't wait to our preview show on Monday.
All right, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.